Alex Reed's head hit the desk with a soft thud for the third time that morning, earning another round of snickers from his classmates in Admiral Harrison's Advanced Fleet Tactics course. Mr. Reed. Admiral Harrison's voice boomed across the lecture hall like a cannon blast. Perhaps you'd care to enlighten us about the Battle of Kepler Station since you seem so relaxed about our discussion. Alex slowly lifted his head, blinking away the drowsiness that seemed to follow him everywhere like a loyal pet. His dark hair stuck up at odd angles, and there was a small puddle of drool on his textbook. Diana Walsh and Sam Torres exchanged knowing looks from their seats in the front row. Here we go again. They thought, sorry, Admiral, Alex mumbled, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Could you repeat the question? The classroom erupted in barely contained laughter. Admiral Harrison's face turned a shade of red that reminded Alex of the Martian sunset he'd once seen in a travel brochure. The old man had been teaching at the Terran Naval Academy for 30 years and had never encountered a cadet quite like Alex Reed. The question, Mr. Reed, was about Admiral Chen's tactical error during the siege. What would you have done differently? Alex stared at the holographic display showing the historical battle formation. His eyes seemed unfocused, as if he was looking through the projection rather than at it. The other cadets waited for the inevitable stammering excuse or admission of ignorance that always followed these moments. Instead, Alex leaned back in his chair and spoke in a voice that was surprisingly clear. Admiral Chen made the classic mistake of fighting the enemy's strength instead of their weakness. The Centauri fleet had superior firepower and armor, so he tried to match them ship for ship. Admiral Harrison's eyebrows shot up. Diana and Sam stopped giggling. He should have used the asteroid field, Alex continued, still staring at the display. Not as cover. Everyone expects that the Centauri ships were built for deep space combat, not navigating debris fields. Their sensors couldn't distinguish between ship signatures and asteroid composition. He could have hidden his entire fleet inside hollowed-out asteroids, then surprised them from 6 different vectors when they moved to secure the station. The classroom fell silent. Admiral Harrison slowly walked closer to Alex's desk, his expression unreadable. That's actually quite insightful, Mr. Reed. But that tactic wasn't developed until 15 years after the Battle of Kepler Station. How did you know about dispersed asteroid deployment? Alex shrugged. Just seemed obvious. Obvious. Admiral Harrison repeated the word as if tasting something bitter. Mr. Reed, that strategy is currently classified and taught only to senior command staff. How exactly did you come across this information? I didn't, Alex said, starting to look uncomfortable under the scrutiny. I just thought about what I would do if I was stuck with a weaker fleet. It's not rocket science. Sam Torres raised his hand. Admiral, Alex sleeps through every class. How could he possibly know advanced tactics? That's an excellent question. Mr. Torres. Admiral Harrison walked to his desk and pulled up Alex's academic file on the main display. Mr. Reed currently holds the lowest grades in strategic studies, fleet command theory, and tactical analysis. He's failed 3 separate examinations on basic formation flying. Yet he just described a maneuver that took our best strategists decades to develop. Alex sank lower in his seat, wishing he could disappear entirely. This was exactly the kind of attention he tried to avoid. The other cadets were staring at him like he'd grown a second head. Diana Walsh looked particularly confused. She'd helped him with his homework just last week, and he'd seemed completely clueless about everything. Perhaps, Admiral Harrison said slowly, we should test this theory, Mr. Reed. Please come to the front of the class. That's really not necessary, Alex started, but the Admiral's expression brooked no argument. Alex shuffled to the front. His uniform wrinkled from sleeping at his desk. Admiral Harrison activated the tactical simulator. Here's a scenario: 5 human ships versus 15 enemy vessels. The enemy has better weapons, faster ships, and numerical advantage. You have 30 seconds to devise a battle plan. The other cadets leaned forward. Diana was practically falling out of her chair. Sam had stopped taking notes entirely. This was either going to be spectacular or embarrassing. Possibly both. Alex studied the display for maybe 10 seconds, then started moving ship icons around the holographic battlefield. Put the heavy cruiser here. Behind the moon, draw their attention with a false retreat. Once they commit to pursuit, the 4 destroyers come out of the planet's shadow and hit their flanks. The cruiser circles back and catches them in a crossfire. That's suicide, Diana blurted out. The cruiser would be outnumbered 5-1. Not if you time it right, Alex replied. Their formation will be stretched out from the chase. The destroyers hit the rear ships first, then work forward. The cruiser only has to handle 3 or 4 ships at most, and they'll be confused about which direction the real threat is coming from. Admiral Harrison ran the simulation. The battle played out exactly as Alex had described. The enemy fleet, caught between 2 forces and unable to coordinate effectively, was destroyed with minimal human casualties. The classroom was dead quiet for a full minute. Remarkable, Admiral Harrison whispered. Absolutely remarkable, Mr. Reed. Where did you learn to think like this? Alex looked genuinely puzzled. I don't know, I just picture what would happen if I was the enemy commander. Then figure out how to mess up his plans. But you sleep through every lesson. Sam protested. You failed the last 3 tests. Tests are different. Alex said, they want you to memorize what other people did. I'm not good at memorizing stuff, but thinking about what might work. That's just common sense. Isn't it? Admiral Harrison stared at Alex for a long moment, then dismissed the class early as the other cadets filed out. Still buzzing with excitement and confusion, he called Alex aside. Mr. Reed, I've been teaching for 3 decades. I've seen brilliant students, dedicated students, and natural leaders. But I've never seen anyone with your intuitive grasp of tactical thinking. The problem is, intuition without knowledge is dangerous. You need to understand the theory behind what you're doing. Alex nodded, though he looked skeptical. I'm going to assign you a special project, Admiral Harrison continued. Instead of regular homework, I want you to analyze historical battles, not to memorize them, but to critique them. Find the mistakes. Identify better solutions. Think of it as a puzzle rather than a lesson. Okay, Alex said, though he didn't sound enthusiastic. Can I go now? I have engineering class next. Yes. But Alex, Admiral Harrison caught his arm. Don't let anyone convince you that sleeping through class makes you stupid. Sometimes the best insights come from minds that aren't cluttered with conventional wisdom. Alex nodded and left, still looking confused about all the fuss as he walked down the corridor. He could hear other cadets whispering about what had just happened. Diana and Sam were probably already spreading the story across the academy. What Alex didn't know was that Admiral Harrison immediately sent a message to the academy, Commandant flagging his file for special attention. The old admiral had seen enough wars to recognize something rare when he encountered it. Alex Reed might be the worst student in academy history, but he was also potentially the most dangerous tactical mind in a generation. Lieutenant Alex Reed wiped the sweat from his forehead as he studied the sensor. Readings that made no sense according to everything he'd learned at the academy. The numbers showed impossible energy signatures moving through space near the Proxima colonies. But 3 different departments had verified the data. What do you think it means? Alex asked Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park, the Resilience's tactical officer. She'd grown accustomed to asking the ship's most junior officer for his opinion, much to the confusion of everyone else in the crew. Something big is coming, Alex replied, his voice unusually serious. These readings suggest a fleet, but the energy output is wrong. It's like they're using technology that doesn't follow our physics. Captain Roy Mitchell approached their station. Having overheard the conversation, the veteran officer had commanded the destroyer Resilience for 8 years and had learned to trust his instincts about people. Alex Reed had been aboard for 6 months. And in that time, Mitchell had watched the young man solve 3 separate technical problems that had stumped his senior staff. Elaborate on that assessment. Reed, Alex pointed to the holographic display. Look at these power signatures. Sir, every human ship has predictable energy patterns based on our fusion reactors and gravitic drives. But these contacts show energy levels that should require antimatter reactors the size of space stations, packed into vessels smaller than our cruisers. Maybe their technology is just more efficient than ours, Sarah suggested. Or maybe, Alex said quietly, they're not human. The words hung in the air like a physical weight for 3 centuries. Humanity had spread across dozens of star systems without encountering any sign of intelligent alien life. The possibility had always existed in theory, but most scientists believed they were alone in this corner of the galaxy. Captain Mitchell's communicator buzzed with an emergency signal from Fleet Command. All ships, This is Admiral Harrison, Priority Alpha message. Enemy fleet has emerged from hyperspace near Colony Beta 7. Initial estimates suggest 15 hostile vessels of unknown configuration they are not responding to. Communication attempts and have opened fire on civilian targets. All available ships are ordered to intercept immediately. The bridge of the Resilience transformed into controlled chaos as the crew prepared for combat. Alex felt his stomach drop as he realized his instincts had been correct, and wished desperately that he'd been wrong. 3 hours later, the human fleet arrived at Beta 7 to find a scene of devastation. The colony's orbital stations were burning wrecks, and the planet's surface showed the scars of orbital bombardment. The enemy fleet waited in perfect formation, their ships unlike anything in human design. Admiral Harrison's voice crackled over the communications channel. All ships, this is Admiral Harrison. We are facing an unknown enemy with superior firepower and technology. Maintain formation and follow standard engagement protocols. Alex watched the tactical display with growing horror as the human fleet deployed in textbook formation. 3 lines of battle with destroyers screening the heavier ships. It was exactly what the Academy taught. Exactly what every simulation had drilled into their heads. This is wrong, Alex muttered. Captain Mitchell heard him. What's wrong? Read the formation, sir. We're fighting them like they're human. But they're not. Alex's hands flew across his console, analyzing the enemy ships. Look at their positioning. They're not using standard formations either. But there's a pattern. Our admirals are treating this like a historical battle. But the enemy isn't following our rules. The first exchange of fire proved Alex right. The alien weapons punched through human shields like they were made of paper. 3 destroyers exploded in the opening salvo, their crews never having a chance to return fire. The alien ships moved with unnatural precision, as if controlled by a single mind. All ships' evasive maneuvers. Admiral Harrison's voice carried a note of panic. Break formation and attack independently. But breaking formation only made things worse. The human ships, trained to fight as coordinated units, became scattered and vulnerable. The aliens seemed to predict every move, countering human tactics before they could be fully implemented. From his position on the Resilience, Alex watched ship after ship disappear from the tactical display. The Intrepid, the Valiant, the New Tokyo, names he'd memorized in Academy history classes, were vanishing in balls of superheated plasma. They're hurting us, Alex said suddenly. Captain Mitchell spun around. What? The enemy formation. They're not trying to destroy us quickly. They're pushing our ships into a specific area of space, like shepherds driving cattle. Alex's fingers danced across his console. There's something special about that region, but I can't figure out what. Sarah Park looked at her sensors. I'm reading gravitational anomalies in that sector, maybe a hidden asteroid field. No, Alex shook his head. Something else. Give me a minute. The battle continued to go badly for the human fleet. Admiral Harrison ordered another formation change, then another. But nothing worked. The alien ships seemed to anticipate every tactical shift. Captain Mitchell found himself taking evasive action as enemy fire bracketed the Resilience. Got it, Alex shouted over the sound of alarms. They're not hurting us to destroy us. They're hurting us away from something. There's a second alien fleet hiding behind the gas giants' moons. They want us focused on this battle so we don't notice the flanking force. Captain Mitchell stared at the tactical display. How can you possibly know that? Because that's what I would do, Alex replied. Pin the enemy's attention with a visible threat while positioning the real killing blow where they can't see it. As if summoned by Alex's words, 30 more alien vessels suddenly appeared on sensors, emerging from behind the system's largest moon. They moved with the same deadly precision as the first fleet, positioning themselves to catch the human forces in a crossfire. Admiral Harrison's voice over the comm sounded defeated. All ships, this is Admiral Harrison. We are severely outnumbered, and outgunned. All vessels are ordered to withdraw immediately. Repeat. General withdrawal signal code. Black to fleet command, code black. Alex had learned about it in Academy classes but never imagined hearing it. The signal meant total defeat, the complete destruction of a human fleet. The Resilience shuddered as it took a glancing blow from an alien weapon. But Captain Mitchell managed to keep the ship operational, as the surviving human vessels fled the system. Alex stood at his console staring at the tactical display that showed the alien fleets regrouping. The enemy had won a complete victory with minimal losses, using tactics that human commanders couldn't understand or counter-read. Captain Mitchell said quietly as they jumped to hyperspace. "I want you to write a full report on everything you observed during that battle. Every insight, every theory, no matter how crazy it sounds, sir. I'm just a junior lieutenant. My opinions don't matter to Fleet Command." Captain Mitchell looked at the young officer with an expression that was part admiration and part concern. "Son, you were the only person on this ship who understood what the enemy was doing. You saw patterns that trained officers with decades of experience missed. That kind of tactical intuition is rare, and right now it might be our only hope of survival." Alex nodded. But as he began writing his report, he couldn't shake the feeling that the human race had just encountered something far more dangerous than anyone realized. The aliens hadn't just defeated a human fleet. They'd made it look easy, and if humanity was going to survive, they would need to learn how to think like their enemies, no matter how alien that thinking might be. The war that would define humanity's future had begun, and the outcome was far from certain. The Emergency War Council aboard the flagship Endeavour felt like a funeral wake, as Admiral Harrison reviewed the devastating losses humanity had suffered in just 2 weeks. Since the first contact at Beta 7, the aliens, now designated as the hegemony based on intercepted communications, had systematically destroyed 6 more human fleets and conquered 12 colonies. Alex Reed sat in the back corner of the briefing room, technically present only because of a clerical error that had listed him as Lieutenant Commander instead of Lieutenant. Nobody had bothered to correct the mistake, and Alex wasn't about to volunteer the information. The room was filled with senior officers, admirals, and strategic planners, people who should have been making these decisions instead of a junior officer who'd barely graduated from the academy. "Gentlemen and ladies," Admiral Harrison began, his voice carrying the weight of humanity's desperate situation. "Our conventional tactics have failed completely. The enemy seems to predict our every move, counter our strategies before we can implement them, and coordinate their fleets with inhuman precision." Admiral Kate Morrison, commander of the 5th Fleet, leaned forward. "What about the reports from Lieutenant Reed on the resilience?" He identified the flanking maneuver at Beta 7 before anyone else. Alex felt every eye in the room turn toward him and wanted to disappear through the deck plating. Admiral Harrison nodded. "Yes. Lieutenant Reed has shown unusual tactical insight, but insight alone isn't enough. We need actionable strategies." The holographic display showed the current military situation, and it was grim. The hegemony controlled a third of human space and was advancing on 3 separate fronts. Earth's remaining fleets were scattered and demoralized, trying to protect dozens of worlds with insufficient forces. "Our remaining options are limited," continued Admiral Harrison. "We can attempt to consolidate our forces for a last stand at the Sol system, or we can try to negotiate some kind of surrender before they destroy every human colony." "Surrender isn't an option," Admiral Morrison said firmly. "The hegemony has shown no interest in taking prisoners. They're conducting systematic extermination." Alex found himself speaking before he realized it. "What if we don't fight them the way they expect?" The room fell silent. Admiral Harrison looked at him with raised eyebrows. "Explain that." "Lieutenant." Alex stood up slowly, feeling his knees shake. "Every battle we've fought, we've used standard human tactics: formation flying, concentrated firepower, defensive screening. The enemy counters everything we do because they've obviously studied our methods." "So what do you suggest?" asked Admiral David Chen, the Academy's former commandant. "We stop fighting like humans," Alex said, his voice gaining confidence. "The hegemony fleets move like they're controlled by a single mind. Right? Perfect coordination, no individual initiative. They expect us to behave the same way. Hierarchical command, predictable responses." Admiral Morrison frowned. "Are you suggesting we abandon military discipline?" "Not discipline," Alex replied, "predictability. The enemy's strength is coordination and superior technology, but their coordination might also be their weakness. If they're used to fighting enemies who think and move as a unified force, what happens when they face something completely chaotic? Admiral Harrison studied the tactical display continue. Alex walked to the holographic projector, his hands shaking slightly. What if we don't use warships at all, not as our primary force anyway? The room erupted in protests and objections. Alex waited for the noise to die down, then continued. The hegemony has studied our military doctrine, our ship designs, our tactical formations, but they probably haven't studied our civilian infrastructure. You want to use civilian ships in combat? Admiral Chen sounded incredulous. That's not just unorthodox. It's suicide, not combat, Alex said. Misdirection. Look at this. He manipulated the display to show the asteroid mining operations near Colony World Beta 7. Mining ships, cargo haulers, passenger transports, research vessels. The enemy ignores them because they're not military targets, but what if they were? Admiral Morrison leaned forward. I'm listening. Alex's fingers flew over the controls, sketching out a battle plan that made several officers gasp in shock. We take every civilian ship we can find, miners, haulers, even pleasure craft. We equip them with sensor jammers and holographic projectors, make them look like warships on enemy scanners. Then we hide our actual fleet inside the asteroid field. The civilians would be slaughtered, Admiral Chen protested. Not if we do it right, Alex replied. The mining ships are already equipped to work in asteroid fields. They know how to navigate debris, use rocks for cover, operate in conditions that would destroy a military vessel, and they're expendable in a way our remaining warships aren't. Admiral Harrison studied the plan with growing interest. You're talking about using the civilian fleet as bait. More than bait, Alex said, warming to his subject, active participants. The miners know those asteroid fields better than anyone. They can hide ships inside hollowed-out rocks, create false signatures, even trigger controlled avalanches to block enemy movement. And while the hegemony is trying to figure out which targets are real, our actual fleet hits them from multiple directions. This is insane, muttered Admiral Chen. We'd be risking thousands of civilian lives. We're already risking them. Alex replied quietly. The hegemony doesn't distinguish between military and civilian targets. They're going to kill everyone anyway unless we find a way to stop them. Admiral Morrison ran simulations on the tactical display. The mathematics are interesting. A coordinated enemy force facing multiple independent actors with unpredictable behavior patterns. It could work, but only if we can convince the civilian captains to participate. They'll participate, Admiral Harrison said grimly. Everyone knows what's at stake. Alex continued refining his plan, adding details that made the other officers shake their heads in amazement or horror. We use everything against them, physics, psychology, even biology. The hegemony ships are built for deep space combat, but what if we force them to fight in an environment where their advantages become liabilities? The gravitational anomalies near Beta 7, Admiral Morrison realized. If we could trigger a controlled collapse of that unstable asteroid cluster. Exactly, Alex nodded. And while they're dealing with debris clouds and gravitational shears, we hit them with weapons they won't expect. Civilian mining charges have more explosive power than military torpedoes. They're just not designed as weapons. The room fell quiet as the senior officers absorbed the implications of Alex's strategy. It was audacious to the point of madness, violated every principle of conventional warfare, and would put thousands of civilian lives at risk. But it was also the first plan anyone had proposed that might actually work against the hegemony's superior forces, Admiral. Harrison looked around the room. Opinions. It's completely insane, Admiral Chen said. It goes against everything we know about fleet tactics, which might be exactly why it could work. Admiral Morrison replied, The enemy has countered every conventional strategy we've tried. This is so unconventional it might catch them completely off guard. Alex sat down heavily, suddenly exhausted. The weight of what he'd just proposed hit him like a physical blow. If his plan worked, thousands of people might survive. If it failed, he would be responsible for the deaths of everyone who trusted him. Admiral Harrison stood up. Lieutenant Reed, you've just outlined the most audacious military strategy I've heard in 30 years of service. It's brilliant, terrifying, and probably our only chance. He paused, looking around the room. I'm authorizing Operation Slingshot immediately. As the senior officers began discussing implementation details, Alex stared at the tactical display and wondered if he'd just saved humanity or doomed it. But one thing was certain: the next battle would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The sleeping student was about to become humanity's most dangerous weapon. The asteroid belt near Colony World Beta 7 buzzed with activity that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. Cargo ships equipped with military sensors worked alongside mining vessels carrying torpedo tubes. While passenger liners bristled with improvised weapons systems, Alex Reed stood in the command center of the converted ore processor New Hope, watching the most unusual fleet in human history prepare for battle. "This is absolutely crazy," muttered Captain Lisa Torres, formerly of the luxury liner Stellar Dream. Her ship now carried enough explosives to level a city, hidden beneath fake passenger compartments. "My insurance company is never going to believe this." Alex smiled despite his nervousness. "Crazy is exactly what we're going for, Captain. The enemy expects rational behavior from military formations, but there's nothing rational about what we're doing." The fleet that assembled around him defied every principle of naval warfare. 230 vessels of every conceivable type, grain haulers converted to missile platforms, research ships equipped with sensor jammers, even a casino ship whose holographic entertainment system now projected false fleet signatures across half the system. "Contact," announced technical specialist Maria Santos from her position at the sensor. "Array hegemony fleet dropping out of hyperspace. Exactly where you predicted they're maintaining standard formation. 15 heavy cruisers with escort screens." Alex studied the enemy formation through the main view screen. The hegemony ships were beautiful in their deadly precision, moving through space with the coordinated grace of a school of fish. Each vessel was a perfect black ellipse marked with geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change as he watched War Commander Thoric's fleet had conquered 6 human systems using identical tactics, overwhelming firepower. Applied with mathematical precision, the alien commander had never faced defeat, had never even been seriously challenged by human forces. His reputation for tactical brilliance was matched only by his reputation for ruthlessness. "They're scanning the asteroid field," Maria reported, reading massive energy signatures from our fake fleet positions. Alex had positioned his holographic projections to simulate a traditional human battle formation. 3 lines of heavy ships with destroyer screens, exactly what Thoric would expect. The alien commander would see what appeared to be humanity's largest remaining fleet, preparing for a desperate last stand. "Signal from the hegemony flagship," Maria announced. "They're demanding our surrender. Let them wait." Alex replied, "Phase 1 begins now." Across the asteroid field, mining ships began their carefully rehearsed dance. Captain Torres fired her converted passenger liner's engines and accelerated toward the enemy formation, her ship's holographic projectors making her appear to be a heavy cruiser. The Stellar Dream was joined by dozens of other civilian vessels, all disguised as military targets. The hegemony fleet responded exactly as Alex had predicted. Thoric's ships moved to intercept what appeared to be a human attack formation, their weapons charging to full power. The aliens had no way of knowing they were pursuing cargo ships and pleasure craft. "Phase 2, Alex ordered. The real surprise came from the asteroid field itself. Mining charges that had been positioned over the past week detonated in carefully timed sequences, sending massive chunks of rock tumbling through space. The explosions created a debris field that would have been navigational hazards for human ships, but for the hegemony vessels with their perfect coordination, the chaotic movement patterns were a nightmare. War Commander Thoric found his fleet suddenly navigating through a 3-dimensional maze of spinning asteroids and expanding debris clouds. His ship's sensors were confused by the multiple false signatures. Unable to distinguish between real threats and holographic phantoms, the hegemony formation began to lose its perfect coordination as individual ships maneuvered to avoid collisions. Now comes the interesting part, Alex muttered, hidden throughout the asteroid field. Human military vessels waited in positions that should have been impossible mining. Ships had spent days hollowing out asteroids, large enough to conceal destroyers and cruisers. The Resilient sat inside a metallic asteroid, her crew breathing recycled air and waiting for Alex's signal. "All ships, this is Reed," Alex broadcast on the tactical frequency. "Execute slingshot. What happened next violated every principle of fleet combat in human history. Instead of coordinated formations and unified tactics, each ship captain was free to engage the enemy using whatever method seemed most effective. The mining ships used their industrial equipment as weapons, firing streams of molten metal and clouds of metallic debris. The cargo haulers launched their entire payloads, grain, ore, manufactured goods, creating massive sensor shadows that confused hegemony targeting systems. Captain Torres dove her converted liner through a gap between two hegemony cruisers, firing mining charges from her improvised launchers. The explosions weren't powerful enough to seriously damage the alien ships, but they created spectacular light shows that further confused enemy sensors. Meanwhile, the real military vessels began emerging from their hiding places. The Resilience burst from its hollow asteroid like a deadly surprise, firing full spreads of torpedoes at a hegemony destroyer that was trying to navigate through a cloud of metallic chaff. The alien ship's perfect coordination couldn't help it when it literally couldn't see what was shooting at. At War Commander Thoric's tactical display showed chaos beyond comprehension. Human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, attacking from impossible angles and using weapons that shouldn't exist. His fleet's superior firepower meant nothing when they couldn't identify legitimate targets. Among the hundreds of false signatures there, formation is breaking apart. Maria reported with barely contained excitement, "The enemy ships are starting to act independently." Alex nodded. This was exactly what he'd hoped for. The hegemony's strength lay in their perfect coordination. But that same coordination became a weakness when faced with a completely chaotic environment. Individual alien captains were trying to make sense of the battle using their own initiative, something they clearly weren't trained for. Phase 3, Alex ordered. All ships, converge on the flagship. The final phase of Operation Slingshot was the most dangerous part. Alex had studied the psychological profiles of every hegemony commander they'd encountered, and he was betting that Thoric would react predictably to having his fleet scattered and confuse the alien commander, would try to restore order by pulling his ships back into formation around his flagship. Gamble worked. Every surviving hegemony vessel began moving toward Thoric's command ship, trying to re-establish their coordinated formation. But Alex had anticipated this move. The human fleet, military and civilian vessels working together, had positioned themselves to catch the aliens in a massive crossfire as they grouped up mining charges, military torpedoes, improvised missiles, and even physical debris converged on the hegemony formation from dozens of different vectors. The alien ships found themselves taking fire from above, below, and all sides simultaneously. Their perfect coordination became a trap, as ships trying to maintain formation couldn't take independent evasive action. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it ended, War Commander Thoric's fleet had been reduced to scattered wreckage drifting. Through the asteroid field, the human losses were significant. Nearly half the civilian vessels had been destroyed. But for the first time since the war began, humanity had achieved a decisive victory. Alex stood in the command center of the New Hope, staring at the tactical display that showed the aftermath of his impossible plan. The debris field told the story better than any report. Human ingenuity and chaos had defeated alien precision and technology. Lieutenant Reed, came Admiral Harrison's voice over the communication system. "Congratulations. You've just won humanity's first major victory against the hegemony." Alex felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. The victory was sweet, but he knew it was just the beginning. The hegemony had dozens of fleets, hundreds of worlds, and technology that humanity was only beginning to understand. But they'd proved something important today. The aliens could be beaten if humans were willing to fight in ways that defied every rule of conventional warfare. As rescue ships moved through the debris field searching for survivors, Alex began planning his next impossible strategy. The war was far from over, and the enemy would be expecting chaos now. Time to give them something even more unexpected. Fleet Commander Alex Reed stood before the holographic tactical display in his new command ship, the converted battlecruiser Defiance, watching as human forces engaged hegemony fleets across 7 different star systems simultaneously. His promotion from lieutenant to fleet commander in just 6 months had shocked everyone, including himself. Sir, the hegemony is responding to our tactics, reported Commander Diana Walsh, his former Academy classmate who now served as his intelligence officer. The woman who once mocked him for sleeping through strategy classes now hung on his every word. They're adapting their formations to counter our chaotic deployment patterns. Alex nodded, having expected this development. Good. That means they're learning to think like us instead of relying purely on coordination. They're starting to develop individual initiative among their ship commanders. How is that good? Asked Captain Sam Torres, now commanding the destroyer screen. If they adapt to our methods, we lose our advantage. Alex smiled, the expression making him look far older than his 26 years because Sam, they're adapting to fight an enemy that thinks like humans. But we're not going to keep thinking like humans, we're going to think like them. The past months had seen a revolution in human military doctrine. Alex's unconventional strategies had spread throughout the fleet. Like wildfire ship captains who had once followed rigid formation protocols, now improvised tactics. On-the-fly civilian vessels had been formally integrated into the military structure, creating hybrid fleets that could appear anywhere and fight using any available resources. But success had brought new challenges. The hegemony collective consciousness struggled to process the flood of contradictory tactical data. Each human engagement provided new information, but the information was increasingly useless. Human commanders were making decisions that defied analysis, using methods that worked once and were never repeated, sir, Diana reported during a staff meeting aboard the Defiance. We're receiving surrender offers from 3 hegemony border fleets. They're requesting terms for withdrawal from human space. Alex raised an eyebrows. Surrender offers, that's new. What changed? According to our intercepts, the hegemony collective is experiencing something they call tactical overflow. Diana explained, their shared consciousness can't process the amount of individual variation our commanders are producing. They're literally getting confused by having too much contradictory information. Captain Torres laughed. So we're winning by being too crazy for them to understand. In essence, yes, Alex replied, but we can't get overconfident. The hegemony still has superior technology and numerical advantages. If they find a way to adapt to individual thinking, we could be in serious trouble. The truth was that Alex's revolutionary approach to warfare was taking a psychological toll on both sides. Human commanders were becoming increasingly isolated, developing their own tactical philosophies that sometimes conflicted with overall strategic goals. Some captains had become so individualistic that they refused to coordinate with other human forces at all on the hegemony side. Their collective consciousness was fragmenting under the stress of trying to understand human behavior. Individual alien commanders were beginning to develop personal initiative, something their species had never experienced before. The result was confusion and internal conflict within their previously unified forces. We need to press our advantage while we still have it, Alex decided. Diana, I want you to coordinate with our propaganda division, start broadcasting messages directly to hegemony commanders. Not their collective consciousness, address them as individuals. Give them personal names, challenge them to independent thought, sir. Is that wise? Diana asked. If we teach them to think individually, won't that eliminate our advantage? Alex smiled grimly. Maybe. But it might also tear their civilization apart. A society built on collective consciousness can't survive if its members start developing individual personalities. We either win this war, or we make it impossible for them to continue as a unified force. The psychological warfare campaign that followed was unlike anything in military history. Human broadcasts specifically targeted individual hegemony commanders, praising their tactical decisions and encouraging them to develop personal fighting styles. The messages were designed to appeal to pride, ambition, and other individual emotions that the collective consciousness couldn't easily suppress. The results exceeded Alex's wildest expectations. Within weeks, reports began arriving of hegemony fleets fighting among themselves. Individual commanders were developing personal grudges, competing for recognition, and refusing to share tactical information. With their collective consciousness, the unified hegemony war machine began showing cracks that rapidly widened into serious fractures. Fleet. Commander Reed, came Admiral Harrison's voice over the secure communications channel. I have new orders from Earth High Command. You're being promoted to Supreme Fleet Commander and given authority over all human military forces. Congratulations. Alex, you've revolutionized warfare itself. Alex stared at the promotion orders with mixed emotions. Part of him was proud of what they'd accomplished. Humanity was winning a war that had seemed hopeless just months earlier. But another part of him worried about what victory might cost. The hegemony collective consciousness was collapsing. But millions of individual aliens were caught in the chaos, sir. Diana interrupted his thoughts. We're receiving a priority message from the hegemony homeworld. It's addressed personally to you. Alex accepted the transmission and found himself looking at a being that was clearly alien but somehow familiar. The creature had the same geometric features as other hegemony soldiers, but its movements seemed more natural, less rigidly coordinated. Human Commander Alex Reed, the alien said in perfectly accented English. I am individual who was once War Commander Thoric. Your tactics have given me something my species has never possessed: personal identity. I am no longer part of the collective consciousness, and neither are thousands of my fellow commanders. Alex leaned forward, fascinated. What do you want? Thoric, to negotiate, the alien replied. Not surrender. Negotiation between equals. Your species has taught mine something valuable about individual thought. We would like to learn more, in exchange for ending this conflict. As Alex considered the unprecedented offer, he realized that his unconventional warfare had achieved something no military strategist had ever accomplished. Not just defeating an enemy, but fundamentally changing their civilization. The sleeping student had become the teacher, and his lessons had transformed both sides of the conflict. The war was ending, not through destruction, but through evolution, and that was perhaps the most human victory of Alani. Was no longer caught off guard by human unpredictability. Their commanders were learning to expect chaos, to prepare for unconventional attacks. The easy victories of the early battles were becoming harder-fought struggles. Commander Walsh, what's the status on our xenobiology analysis? Alex asked. Diana pulled up a new display showing detailed scans of captured hegemony technology and biological samples. Dr. Martinez's team has made significant progress. The aliens are definitely hive-minded, but not in the way we initially thought. Individual hegemony soldiers retain personal consciousness, but they're linked through some kind of quantum entanglement network. Alex studied the data with growing interest. This was exactly the kind of information he'd been hoping for. So, they share thoughts and experiences across their entire species. To some extent, yes, Diana confirmed, which explains their perfect coordination, but it also means they have trouble understanding truly individual thinking. Every hegemony commander has access to the collective experience of their entire race, but no original ideas, Alex mused. They can adapt to patterns they've seen before, but genuine innovation requires individual creative thinking. That's humanity's real advantage, and we're all crazy in different ways. Captain Torres frowned. Sir, are you saying we should make our tactics even more chaotic? Not chaotic, Alex corrected, individualistic. The hegemony expects human unpredictability now, but they're still thinking collectively about how to counter it. What they can't predict is genuine human creativity applied systematically. Alex turned to address his staff. New doctrine? Effective immediately. Every ship captain in the fleet gets complete tactical autonomy. No formations, no coordinated strategies, no unified command structure. Each captain fights according to their own instincts and experience. The bridge fell silent. Commander Walsh looked concerned. Sir, that's not military doctrine, that's anarchy. Exactly, Alex replied. The hegemony collective mind can analyze and counter any systematic approach, but they can't predict the individual decisions of 3,000 different human commanders all acting independently. Over the following weeks, Alex's new doctrine produced results that shocked both sides of the conflict. Human fleets began winning battles through sheer unpredictability. Each ship captain developed their own fighting style, their own tactical preferences, their own methods of using available resources. Captain Maria Santos of the converted mining ship Lucky Strike became famous for using asteroid debris as improvised ammunition. Captain Lisa Torres turned her luxury liner into a mobile command center that coordinated civilian vessels while staying hidden among commercial traffic. Captain Roy Mitchell of the Resilience perfected the art of hiding military ships inside seemingly innocent Cargo convoys, supreme. Fleet Commander Alex Reed stared into the swirling depths of hyperspace through the viewport of his flagship, knowing this would be the last battle of the war. The hegemony homeworld lay ahead, protected by the largest alien fleet ever assembled, but it was no longer a unified force. The collective consciousness that had once coordinated their every move was fracturing, creating chaos in what should have been their strongest defense. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures around the homeworld," reported Commander Diana Walsh. "It looks like Supreme General Corvin has assembled every remaining loyal ship in hegemony space. Nearly 200 vessels, but they're not maintaining standard formation." Alex nodded. Having expected this final confrontation, Corvin represented the old guard of the hegemony collective, the commanders who refused to embrace individual consciousness. Despite the psychological warfare that had fractured their civilization, roughly half of their military remained loyal to the collective ideal. "What about the rebel fleets?" Alex asked, individual who was once war commander. "Thoric has positioned his forces at the system's edge." Diana replied, "His message indicates they'll remain neutral unless Corvin attacks civilian targets." The situation was unlike anything in military history. The hegemony homeworld was defended by two separate alien fleets that might fight each other as readily as they would fight humanity. Corvin's loyalist forces maintained their traditional collective coordination, while Thoric's rebels had developed individual tactical styles learned from studying human methods. Alex's own fleet reflected the evolution of human warfare over the past year. 300 ships of every conceivable type, from converted civilian vessels to purpose-built military craft. Each captain had developed their own fighting style, their own preferred tactics, their own interpretation of the chaotic doctrine that had brought them this far. Signal from Supreme General Corvin, announced Communications Officer Maria Santos. He's demanding the immediate surrender of all human forces and the return of what he calls corrupted hegemony consciousness units. "Tell him to go recalibrate his collective algorithms," Alex replied, earning chuckles from his bridge crew. "All fleet commanders, this is Supreme Commander Reed. Final battle protocols are in effect: fight smart, fight dirty, and come home alive." The battle began with Corvin's forces attempting their traditional coordinated assault, moving in perfect formation toward the human fleet. But the psychological fractures in hegemony society had affected even the loyal ships. Individual commanders were second-guessing collective decisions, creating hesitation and uncertainty in what should have been flawless execution. Alex watched the enemy approach and saw the pattern immediately. "They're fighting two wars at once," he murmured. "Half their attention is on us, and half is on maintaining collective unity." Diana, "Signal all ships. Focus your attacks on the formations that look most coordinated. Those are the ships still fully connected to the collective." What followed was perhaps the strangest battle in galactic history. Human ships, guided by individual creativity and chaotic tactics, engaged hegemony forces that were literally fighting with themselves. Some alien vessels maintained perfect collective coordination while others broke formation to pursue individual initiatives. The result was a confused melee that played perfectly into human strengths. Captain Torres, commanding a mixed squadron of destroyers and converted cargo ships, found herself fighting alongside a group of rebel hegemony vessels, led by an individual who called himself Freedom Seeker 9. The aliens had learned human tactical improvisation so well that Torres couldn't tell the difference between her human and alien wingmates, but Corvin was not finished. The Supreme General activated what appeared to be a massive weapon built into the homeworld itself, a gravitational manipulator that began creating artificial singularities throughout the battle space. Human and rebel alien ships alike found themselves caught in crushing gravitational fields that their engines couldn't escape. "He's trying to collapse the entire system," Alex realized with growing horror. "If that weapon reaches full power, it'll create a black hole that will destroy everything within 10 light-years." The tactical situation became desperate. Corvin's weapon was protected by the planet's entire defensive grid. While his remaining loyal fleet provided additional cover, Alex's forces were powerful enough to defeat the fleet or destroy the weapon. But not both simultaneously, "Sir," Diana said quietly. "There might be a way. The gravitational manipulator requires massive energy input from the planet's core. If we could overload their power grid by triggering a cascade failure, Alex studied the tactical display. Seeing the solution immediately, it would require sacrificing the flagship to deliver a massive electromagnetic pulse directly into the planet's energy distribution network. The Defiance carried enough firepower to disrupt the weapon, but the ship would have to survive a suicide run through the heaviest defenses in hegemony space. All ships. This is Supreme Commander Reed, Alex broadcast. I'm ordering a general withdrawal to minimum safe distance. The Defiance will handle the planetary target. Sir, that's suicide, Captain Torres protested over the comm. The defensive grid will tear you apart before you get within range. Alex looked around his bridge at the crew who had followed him through impossible battles. Not if you give me enough distraction. All fleet units, execute the most chaotic attack pattern you can imagine. I need Corvan's attention focused everywhere except on one small battlecruiser. What followed was a symphony of controlled chaos. Every human captain unleashed their most creative and unpredictable tactics. Simultaneously, civilian ships disguised as military. Targets drew fire while real warships attacked from unexpected angles. Mining. Vessels triggered explosive charges that created debris clouds. Luxury liners broadcast false surrender signals while launching improvised missiles in the confusion. The Defiance slipped through the defensive grid like a knife through silk. Alex's crew worked with desperate efficiency, modifying their ship's main reactor to produce an electromagnetic pulse powerful enough to disrupt an entire planet's power grid. 1 minute to target, reported Navigation Officer Sam Chen. Sir, we won't be able to escape the blast radius, Alex nodded. Having already calculated the odds, I now signal the fleet to maintain safe distance and prepare to accept surrender from any hegemony forces that survive. Alex, Diana said quietly, it's been an honor serving under your command. The honor was mine, Alex replied. All hands, prepare for electromagnetic pulse deployment. The Defiance dove toward the hegemony homeworld at maximum acceleration, her crew fighting to keep the ship functional under crushing gravitational forces. At the last possible moment, Alex triggered the overloaded reactor. The electromagnetic pulse that erupted from the dying battlecruiser was visible across half the star system. It cascaded through the planet's power grid like lightning, overwhelming safety systems and causing the gravitational weapon to collapse in on itself. The artificial singularities winked out of existence, replaced by a massive explosion that lit up the homeworld's atmosphere in the aftermath. Alex found himself floating in an escape pod, watching rescue ships from both human and rebel hegemony fleets searching the debris field. The war was over. Corvan's loyalist forces had surrendered when their homeworld's defenses failed, and the rebel aliens were requesting formal diplomatic relations with humanity. 6 months later, Alex Reed stood in a wheat field on his family's farm on New Montana, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and red. His uniform hung in a closet back on Earth, replaced by work clothes and muddy boots. The hero's welcome had been overwhelming, but this quiet retirement was exactly what he needed. Alex called his neighbor, a former hegemony commander who now called himself Patrick. The harvest mechs are acting up again. Could you take a look? Alex smiled and headed toward the barn. It seemed that even in retirement, people expected him to solve impossible problems. But fixing farm equipment was a lot more peaceful than revolutionizing galactic warfare. Behind him, human and alien children played together in the fields, learning games that mixed the creativity of one species with the logic of another. The sleeping student had awakened to save 2 civilizations, and now both were learning what it meant to think as individuals while working together. Some lessons, Alex reflected, were worth any price.